am super excited to pass things over to Shubham Kumar, who's going to be our fiery designer who will be leading us through this really exciting next module. I think it's really the heart of some of the work that we were initially envisioning for this project. So with that, Shubham, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Marinya. All right. Hello, everyone. I'll just quickly go over the agenda. We'll start things off with a mystery design activity. So of course, stay tuned. The next thing would follow is we'll just discover a bunch of design methods, of course, in which we're going to take a closer look at human-centered design, which is our star candidate. And then we'll dive a little bit deep into HCD. So we'll just go over identifying user needs, designing to user needs, and evaluation and iteration, which are like the three main steps in HCD. And then finally, we'll go over what does it mean to build a good design, and then give you access to some of the resources that we think are really cool. So with that, that's the agenda for today. And then let's move to the next slide. So the facilitators, right? I'm Shubham Kumar, as Marinya introduced me. I'm a senior product designer at the Healthy Regions and Policies Lab. And of course, we're joined here with Jose, who is, our postdoctoral researcher. Kamaria is instructional design specialist. Marinya, as you know, is the principal investigator. And then we are also joined with our team members, Mark, who is the research coordinator, and Mandela, who is our research assistant. Okay, so now let's kick things off with a mystery design activity. So if we go to the next slide, let's just go over what we are planning to do. All right, so we're gonna break out into teams, and then each team needs to take a look at the needs statement. So right in the top of the slide, you can see a needs statement that says patients need a more efficient system for scheduling appointments at the clinic. So this is the needs statement that you're going to work with. And you're going to come up with two simple statements that denote, different features, functionalities, addressing the needs. So you have 5 minutes to do this. If you go back to the previous slide, a couple of slides actually. Yes, if you stay on this one, and then so of course two statements, and then you have 5 minutes. So sample statements could look like implement an online appointment scheduling system that allows patients to view available time slots and book appointments directly through the clinic's website or mobile application. So something like this, a statement or actually two that describe how you would, address the need. And the need, of course, is right at the top, reveal. And so here, the actual needs statement was patients from non-English speaking backgrounds struggle to navigate the current clinic appointment system due to language barriers. Now, look, when you provided those responses, those were all right, but it was probably for a wrong problem statement or a needs statement. So what this exercise really means to do is to show you that at times we gather feedback from users, from stakeholders, and then they say something, and then we actually go back to our desks and start working on it, while actually needing to focus on further doubling down into that need statement itself. So in this case, actually, the efficiency was a concern because non-English speakers weren't able to quickly get an appointment. They had to spend the time to figure out how could they ensure things are smoother for them. So the idea behind this was for you to understand that even if you gather feedback, there is always more you need to do. And so, the question you would ask yourself is, did you consider diverse needs for different population needs? And so I think in this activity, the takeaway is that it's important to, focus on design early on, because good design saves you time, effort, money, and other resources, because it doesn't get moved to development, doesn't get tested, because all of that is futile if you do not design it correctly. So yes, that's the mystery design activity for you. Let's move to the next slide. So yeah, just briefly sharing this, on the right-hand side, you see there's an empathy map for this persona. So, your stakeholders would say, think, do, and feel differently. They're all four different things. And at times you have to find clusters, you have to find things that are similar, and you have to ask them more questions. So, that's something important, right? From the start for you to understand that when you design something, you need to make sure that you recognize that something that a stakeholder shares often needs a little more digging in. And that's when you get the real thing out. So, yeah, it takes a while, but it's well worth the effort, because once you do that, then you can design more efficiently. All right, so let's move into design methods in HCD. Over here, now we do understand that there is a certain approach that is required in design. If there is less effort put early on, then it could lead to incorrect design. And so there is merit in having a design method that you could follow. So, of the many benefits, I just want to highlight some of the most practical ones. When you're designing, there's a lot of things you could do, but if you do have a method, it ensures that nothing falls through the cracks. You check every little box, and design is also a bit about, like, getting every little detail right at times, because it really, if your project has a good design, it's often the little things that matter. So design method helps with that. The other thing is, you do it once, you do it twice, you keep repeating the method you use, you get good at it. So yep, you become a designer pretty much. And the last thing I wanted to mention why using a design method is fruitful is because it helps to access resources that's already available on the web. There are a bunch of really good articles and like resources that you could access. So if you have a method, you could always refer and see how much do you want to follow, adhere to a method, or if you want to figure out deviations from it. These are some of the design methods on the right. I'll just keep it super quick. We'll just focus more on human-centered design because it's more user-focused. And also, you collaborate with teams, but you also go back to your desk and you focus on what do they need. But the other methods are participatory design that involves the user all along, like from the start till the end and every step in the middle. Design thinking is a really lightweight framework, so you could use design thinking for absolutely anything. It works in a loop: empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. And then you have universal design that's meant for accessibility and just trying to reach a wider range of audience. And finally, you have experience design, where you have more interaction design related things, and you work on the inner design aspects rather than the outer. So yeah, those were some of the other methods, but our focus really will be on HCD. And so if we can move to the next slide. Over here, the star candidate really is human-centered design, because it's a really well-researched framework. It gives you a lot of opportunities to access resources on the web. And that's just not the only benefit. The main thing is also that it's pretty flexible, so it adapts to your needs. And as you go about using HCD, you'll realize that at each step you want to diverge first, think wide, think open, and then converge, narrow down the scope, and then focus on building a prototype. And then again you diverge, and then again you think of different ways you can solve the problem. And then you keep diverging, converging until you reach a point where you have something tangible and useful. So there are three steps in HCD. The first one is identifying user needs. What do they need? The second thing is designing to those needs that you just identified. And the third one is evaluating and iterating until the users are satisfied. So it's a fairly straightforward process. In this, I think the number one thing really is to understand that there are certain things that users hope that they accomplish with the conditions that allow them to do so. And something that you would be able to do to capture those hopes that they have is through workshops. So workshops could be virtual, could be in person. It just depends, like how you would be able to work with your stakeholders. But each has its own strength and weaknesses. And so that is for you to decide which would be the better approach. Virtual, of course, gives you opportunity to engage people from different geographical locations. And then, of course, you could try a bunch of things like poll, chat, etc. That could, ensure there's participation. But in person is also really good. It gives you a different experience, and you could use resources like whiteboards, sticky notes, stationery, etc. And when you're conducting these workshops, the only thing you also want to note is um, establishing common terminology. So because you're working in a contextually niche environment, what could happen is your stakeholders sometimes may not understand what you're saying. So setting a common ground for terminology really helps as you go about these workshops. All right, let's move to the next slide. I want to hand it over now to Jose, who's going to talk about user personas. Over to you, Jose.
Thank you, Shyam, and hello, guys. Nice to see you again. So one of the stars for human-centered design is to create user personas. And it's something that you already start doing when you start working in your work document. And I was reading in LinkedIn. And that's when you start answering the question, who's my application for? You already know, you don't know who are going to be the potential users, but you have an idea. And creating user personas are going to help you to refine that idea. So I'm going to give you some hints. You need to assumptions of who do you think they are. And after you met them, you will compare that with this assumption, with the user persona. And then by creating user personas, you also will create this imaginary template that will refer to you who could be these potential users, their needs, preferences, behaviors, and goals. So we have activity 2, and we're going to draw in Tyler, but I hope this is going to be fun. We're going to work with the previous statement that Shuba referred in a few slides ago. Patients from non-English speaking backgrounds struggle to navigate to current clinic appointment system due to language barriers. We're going to, with a template that we prepare for you, we're going to work with your team again and work with this template. And what you want to create a very lean user persona, somebody who's fictional but could be the potential user of a you will put in this template character, occupation, the interest, the unique struggles that they may have. You will have 10 minutes to create this potential user persona for this application. After those 10 minutes working in template, we're going to provide a link in a few seconds.
Yeah, so basically, I mean, you must have realized as you're working with the personas that it's important to understand for whom you're even like designing, right? So that's the purpose behind the first step. So that comes to an end. That is identifying user needs. Now let's move to designing to user needs once you've identified those needs. Kamari, you want to take it over from here?
Absolutely. It was really great to hear you to share your user persona. So thank you so much. So after you've identified your user needs, now we'll jump into designing to your user needs. This part focuses on the application's user interface, which is a key element of the design process that you should definitely consider. The initial thing you want to do is organize your functions. And right here, you'll see the example of like your homepage, the visualization, and your community resources. And for that, we'll do our card sorting activity. In Figma, and I think it's the same link, or you'll get a link right now for Figma. You'll see one side with the column of sticky notes, and then 3 columns next to them. And you'll just go ahead and match the sticky notes to the appropriate column. You'll see the example of kind of if it was already done, how it is right here in front of you, something similar. It's best to have one person take the notes for the group and be sure to like actually share the notes with your members. So yeah, I mean, like that's basically like the simplified version. You'll see the sticky notes on the side of like the different aspects. Like for example, in this one is food access, and then you will match it to the homepage, for example. Maybe I can just quickly, I kind of want to go through the one simple example. Yes. So obviously underneath your user persona, you'll see your different teams and just pick the appropriate team. And then, like I said, you have your sticky note, you pick one. Where do you think you'll go? Would it go in the core navigation, enhancement, accessibility? Let's say if I pick interactive map, I might want to Oh, for some reason I can only view. Maybe hopefully everyone else can see it. But anyway, you would just basically drag it to the appropriate area. Okay, that's pretty much it.
Let's talk about design aesthetics. We talked a whole lot about, different like, design activities and processes and things like that. Aesthetics is one of the first things that, would come to your mind the moment you hear the word design. And so I want to start this by saying there is a law in the world of UX, user experience, that is called aesthetic usability effect. And it says users often perceive aesthetically pleasing design as design that's more usable. So it's one of the core, principles that you always keep in mind, that a good looking design is often perceived to be a good design. And so some things to keep in mind as you build your application, as you see on the slide, is like starting off with navigation. So making sure navigation is clear, you are writing in blocks, text is easy to read, elements are clearly organized, images are clear, and the layout is uncluttered. These are simple things, but then, as you build your application, you may experience that it becomes a challenge as you're designing or developing it. And so going back to these would always help you to make sure that, okay, your design aesthetics is something that you're able to keep in mind as you build your product. Okay, and now let's talk about design tools. So design tools are of course necessary as you're beginning to actually make something tangible from all these ideas and discussions that you may have had in the past, in the steps prior to this. So one of the best ways to get started is to really use your pen and paper. Like there's no better tool than a pen and a paper, and then you could just get started. It's great for creating something really quickly. You can share it, get feedback. So, a paper prototype example, as you see on this slide, is what something you could, take a look at, and then maybe build something like this for your own application. Then moving to the next slide, there's something called as low fidelity prototype, low or mid fidelity. So basically, low or mid fidelity is great for showing a user interface without actually building it. You could use tools like Mockflow or wireframe.cc to just, put something on a design tool without actually having to, focus on, every little thing as to how it's going to look like in the final version. And then moving to the next slide, speaking of final version, you have high fidelity prototypes. So over here, you would focus on how the user interface would actually look like. So, design aesthetics and like even little things like, your colors, themes, etc. that you're gonna want to use. And so, tools like Figma, the one that we used just now was FigJam, but that's for brainstorming. You have Figma. It's the same tool really, but it creates a different kind of file that allows you to focus on things that high fidelity prototypes allow you to do. So Figma, Wondershare, Mockit, and Quant UX are some examples that allow you to do it. So that's in terms of design tools. And now so let's take a step back. What we've discussed so far is, first we started off with identifying user needs. We talked about user personas, just trying to understand for whom are we even working for. The next thing was, designing for those needs. So how would you do that? You would, engage in cart sorting or an activity similar to that. You would just, write down all the features that you can think of, give it to the users, let them do it for you, let them sort it for you, let them add new sticky notes, remove, edit. But you create a bunch of features and then and functionalities, and you give it to them, and then they sort it, and then they help you figure out the structure of your application. And then so that's about designing for their needs. And then we of course talked about design aesthetics, and then we touched upon design tools in the previous slide. So we've worked on designing for those needs. Now it's time to evaluate and iterate. So let's move to the next slide. One of the best ways to evaluate is to really perform usability heuristics. Now, one of the best things about performing usability heuristics analysis is you can do this kind of testing by yourself. You could have users involved, they could help you with, certain kind of granular feedback if they may have to share, but you could still perform this by yourself before you actually share the application with users. So that's one of the main benefits, but the other thing that it also comes with is it's pretty fast. It doesn't take a whole lot of time. It's inexpensive, so it doesn't, cost you a lot, in terms of the tools, technologies, and just the know-how that you need. You can learn about this, and then it takes a bit of practice for sure, but then you can improve as you continue to perform the usability heuristics over time. And so we'll stay on the slide and let's focus on the right-hand side right now. So there are 10 usability heuristics that you see here. Let's actually briefly discuss on each of these 10, starting off with visibility of system status. So what does it mean, right? This is all about keeping users constantly updated on what the system is doing. So the system must offer clear feedback on their actions and system responses promptly, ensuring there's always, a visibility in terms of what the current status of the system is. The second one is match between system and real world. It's about speaking the user's language and organizing information in a way that mirrors how they think and operate in the real world. This can be done by using familiar terms and conventions to guide users through the interface seamlessly. The third one is user control and feedback. So, it's about empowering users to navigate the system with ease and confidence. This can be achieved by providing intuitive ways for users to backtrack or exit undesirable states or actions, giving them a sense of control and freedom over their interactions. So as you can see, the visual representation that we've gone with over here is Control Z. Like, you could undo something that you've probably incorrectly done. And then moving to consistency and standards. So this is all about maintaining uniformity throughout the user interface, ensuring that similar elements behave predictably and are presented consistently. This is achieved by adhering to established design patterns and standards to create a cohesive and intuitive user experience. Think of using a theme, that could really help you with consistency. Every primary color looks similar, every secondary color looks similar, etc. Then you have error prevention. Error prevention is about the system, about designing the system to anticipate and prevent user errors when possible. Think of, implementing safeguards such as confirmation dialog boxes to mitigate the risk of unintended actions and provide a safety net for users to catch before, mistakes happen. So think of it as, hey, are you sure you want to delete this? Something as similar, as simple as that goes a long way. The next one is recognition and recall. So information that is presented, needs to ensure that it reduces the cognitive load that it has, minimizing the need for them to recall details from memory. So, making efforts that helps them not necessarily trying to recall some of their older interactions, but just by visually seeing that, okay, if this, say, icon is an indication that the availability of this particular resource, for example, is in abundance, so you use a green dot, so it helps you with recognition and recall rather than recall, because now you know. And it also actually touches upon the first point here, which is visibility of system status. So if it's green, it's available, but it also helps you quickly recognize. Moving to the seventh one is flexibility and efficiency of use. So this is about catering to users of varying skill levels by offering shortcuts or customization options to streamline their tasks. It's about allowing users to tailor their experience to suit their preferences, making interactions more efficient and accommodating for their individual needs. So, simple things like, if you're making a dashboard, is it possible to, allow them to shuffle change the order in which you're if you're able to see the home screen of the dashboard, because certain users want to focus more on, let's say, reporting, while certain users want to just focus on the details. So it simple things like that. And then eighth one is aesthetic and minimalistic design. It's about, striving for simplicity and elegance in the user interface, focusing on essential elements while eliminating unnecessary clutter, creating a visually pleasing environment that enhances usability by directing users' attention to what matters most is key to this, really. And I think this is fairly um, obvious, but at times, when you're making your application, it could be a challenge to ensure that you want to add more details, but you still want to keep it minimalistic. So, there's always that push and pull. But as you work through these heuristics, you'll figure out that, okay, if there's something you need to cut back on, then you would do that. Moving to the ninth one, help users with errors. So it's about communicating errors clearly and constructively, using plain language to explain the problem and offering actionable solutions to resolve it. It's about guiding users through the error recovery process smoothly, helping them troubleshoot and recover with confidence. So it's quite natural that your users are going to, probably make an error. And now it's about how do you help them from there? So, do you have a recovery plan, or do you have a walkthrough using which they could, like, either revert back to their previous state, or could accommodate a change? So those are things to think of. And finally, you have help and documentation, which is straightforward. It's about providing accessible and user-friendly help resources for users seeking assistance. Think of offering a clear, concise documentation that addresses common questions and concerns, empowering users to find answers and guidance whenever they need it. So, if you have a space in your application where you could dedicate to just sharing a bunch of documentation materials, that is preferably simple to understand. And even if, if depending on your user base, if you want to have it in multiple languages, things like that. So these are simple, heuristics, usability heuristics that you could always use. And so you may be asking, how do these things really, matter in your own application? And I think the best way to think about it is to always actually go back to the title of the heuristic, and possibly even the icon, right? That helps you understand that, oh, this is what the usability heuristics is all about. So with that, now let's actually move to the next slide.
We want to talk about evaluation and how we can connect with our users. And this could be a really long, and it's even a model by itself, but I want to just take some time and give you some pointers what you need to consider when you are doing interviews or surveys. So in case of interviews, what the pandemic left us were different flavors of interviews. Usually they were in person, but right now we have remote, and we can mix and match both types of interviews. On the other hand, when we do interviews, they could be open, they could be like we talk with the users, semi-structured or structured. When I talk about structured interviews, is you have 10, 15 questions you will ask to each one of the users, because you want to code them and you want to compare the answers. The other option that you have is focus groups. You are more a facilitator. You pop up questions and let them discuss. What I want you to be careful about this is that in focus groups, usually there are power dynamics. One user could be more dominant than other and can influence the response to others. So when you facilitate, to orchestrate a way that everybody feels at ease and feel the trust to share their own experience. What questions should be written and presented should be in a way you can evaluate. It's a flow. It's a way that people feel at ease at first, then perhaps you should be more focused on particular parts of your application. Incentives. This is a really picky issue, because some of us have the time or the money to give incentives, but they help. So if, for example, you have a grant and give something to the users, that will be really helpful, and also it's a way to compensate for the spend. How could you structure your interview? Well, perhaps you can do it in many ways. We present four. First, an introduction. The user can just state the background, and you can state yours. This is mostly to create rapport, that they feel at ease, to warm up. Then you start talking about your application, what they expect application, what they feel that were really difficult because they have no previous experience with the application, improved in those particular parts of it. Experience, what they use more, less, what they like, what was really something that catch attention, and then potential feedback. And by feedback, as Kamaya said at the beginning of this module, sometimes you also want the bad ones because it's how you learn. And to have those, you need to build trust with the users. The other that you have is to create surveys. And the surveys, they are less resource intensive, and maybe you can reach a major audience for your application. You will need, for a survey to work, you mix different questions. That is multiple choice, sometimes you rank, and some questions in a survey, be super careful about jargon, because we as academics will like that. And sometimes people say, like, I don't understand what user-centered design, I don't understand what heuristics. So try to be really careful of how you write your questions. Really important, mention the time that it will take to complete. Perhaps it's 3 minutes, 5 minutes. Different ways to create the survey. Sometimes it's via Google Forms, Qualtrics, or even printed sheets. In 20 seconds, please be aware of IRB guidelines. If you're working with the university, you will need to comply with those. And by those, think about the encryption, security data storage, and the anonymity of your users. It's always good to check all that before with your user research feedback. And I will pass it back to Shua again.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so now let's talk about iteration. We've just discussed a whole lot about, what you could do and, what is in the best interest of your users. But something key is to actually go back again to the first step and repeat everything again, because what it allows you to do is the next time when you do the same set of things, you're then doing it with a lot of with a lot more clarity, and that really helps because you're spending probably the same amount of time on the same thing with more clarity. Each time you iterate, you're becoming more focused on what exactly the needs of your users are, and then catering to that. So it's really important to understand that design is never just like linear. It happens, but then you again go back to the starting point, and then you again, understand or identify user needs, because if you have certain amount of clarity, you want to further double down and then see if you're able to understand them a little more the next time you work on it. So going back to again defining what your user needs are, and then figuring out what your designs could look like, and then evaluating them is an iterative process. Do it as many times as you can until you reach a point where you feel like you're satisfied because your users are satisfied. So that's about iteration. Design and more resources. All right. We spoke about human-centered design, but what's important to understand is it's one of the ways through which you can, achieve your design goals. At the end of the day, if we move to the next slide, the idea really is to just have a good design. It's as simple as that. So there are certain ways through which you could assess your design. Fairly simple, the ones that you see on the slide. Is your design useful? Is it usable? Is it desirable? Is it findable? Is it accessible? Is it credible? And some of the heuristic evaluation pointers that we heard from, from the groups really like spoke about these elements in parts, but all of what you do actually eventually, comes down to this. is the design good or not? And so it's important to have this assessment as well. Once you're done with all your steps and once you iterate over and over again, this is a good check to see where you're at with your entire application. So once you're done with everything, this is a great way to assess where you're at. So speaking of good design, if we go to the next slide, there are resources on the web. So you have the Figma help pages. You have Interaction Design Foundation, which is one of the best design foundations around. And then you have Nielsen Norman Group. These are all like reliable sources. You will have additional resources, of course, and references provided in the toolkit page that you have access to now. So just making sure that if at any point in time you feel a bit lost or you need a little more inspiration, these are fantastic resources. We use them and we urge you to use them as well. So yes, these are some fantastic resources. And with that, we're coming to an end of this session. I think I hope it was fun. There's still just a little bit more that we'll touch upon.